Cool, cool. So, hello again. We want to begin by recognizing that we are on occupied land. This is Haudenosaunee land. And also a few announcements we have. Sign up for the WMST outreach. Clipboard will be going around if you're not already on it. And tonight at 7 p.m. in La Auditorium, the founder of the China Rebels, Prisca Dorca Rodriguez, will be giving a keynote for LASO's Hispanic Heritage Month, so that will be really awesome. And Thursday at WMST at 5 p.m., we will have the Survivors Live Here reading. It's open to all people, and their readings are available here and online on our Facebook page, so that's definitely something you should check out. And next Tuesday, Sisters of the Brown Table Sort will be hosting our brown bag. If you need to leave in the middle of the brown bag, please just remember to do so quietly. And trash and compost and all that fun stuff is over there. We can, clean up after ourselves. Just make sure we do that. And if you can stay till the end, it'd be really awesome if you could help put the chairs back and just make that a faster process. And also, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a really amazing brown bag. Professor Serna is going to introduce our speaker.
So, Aurora Guerrero is a queer Chicana director and screenwriter, originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. She has an MFA in film directing from Cal Arts and a BA in psychology and Chicano studies. As an activist filmmaker, Aurora has focused on producing collaborative work with various communities. Just to mention some, I know many of you have watched the film Mosquita y Mari, which was screened last week, but just to mention a few of her earlier projects that are also, I think, really important in understanding her trajectory as a filmmaker. Early in her career, she co-founded Women Image Makers, along with Dalila Mendez, Maritza Alvarez, and Claudia Mercado. As part of this collective, she directed a short film, Pura Lengua, which debuted in the Sundance Film Festival. And another one of her short films, Viernes Girl, won an HBO short film competition. Then in 2012, Aurora made her first feature film, Mosquita y Mari. And with this film, she became the first Chicana filmmaker to debut a feature-length film at Sundance Festival. Mosquita y Mari also broke records, and it became the first film to raise $80,000 through a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign. So it broke records in that sense. And to me, I think this is also significant in that it shows the importance that the film had for all of the backers, right, who donated money, who believed in Aurora's talent and vision, but also who I think really believed and wanted to see this film, this story of a love between two young Chicanas on the big screen, right? And so this investment, this community investment in the film speaks to the importance and significance of the images that Aurora creates. So today we're excited to be able to welcome Aurora Guerrero with us at Colgate. Professor Rios and I will be moderating the conversation with her. So please join us in welcoming Aurora to Colgate and to the university. And we're going to start with a brief, showing the trailer for the film Mosquita y Mari, for those of you who might not have seen the film. And then from there we'll start going to our conversation.
Tell me something you never told me. Mosquita y Mari.
Whenever anybody gets on our network, this will be our meeting response.
I love that smile. ¿Cómo fue que lo conociste a mi papá?
¿De qué hablas?
Usted sabe cosas de la vida.
Te hemos dicho perfectamente que lo único que te tiene que preocupar es la escuela.
no ando en chinga todo el día para que tú lo eches todo a perder.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That was here. No, we're here.
It's me.
¿Alguien te está acosando?
No, últimamente andas en las nubes, ¿no? Reina?
¡Mari! ¡Ya para eso, mija! ¡Hey!
¿Qué diablos te pasa, hija? Estoy seguro que ese muchacho es la causa de su desfallecimiento.
Hello, everyone.
I'll start with our first question and then pass it over to Aurora. The first question we have for you is we wanted to ask you if you could tell us about your inspirations for becoming a filmmaker, and more specifically, what was your inspiration for making this film, Mosquita y Mari?
Well, I just want to say thank you to Christina and Anna for having me here, for the Women's Center opening up the space for myself to come and chat with y'all. And I want to thank all of you all for coming. Hopefully it's not just because you get a free lunch. I remember when I was at Cal, that's what I would do. Free lunch. And maybe learn something. So thank you. So my inspiration for becoming a filmmaker, I just came from speaking in your class, and and I talked a little bit about this, but my inspiration for becoming a filmmaker was really kind of started with my coming into my political consciousness when I was at Cal, and wanting to take part in those conversations, wanting to share my thoughts and ideas, wanting to share people's thoughts and ideas, wanting to impact and engage my communities, be a part of social change. Like, I was in that dream. Like, I understand. I understand how important all those things are. I want to be a part of it. But it was trying to figure out how was I going to be a part of that, right? I was surrounded by academics who were engaging in social change through academia. I was exposed to poets, playwrights, and visual artists who were engaging social change through their art. And so I was exposed to these kind of two camps, and I never saw myself going the artist route because I was, I didn't grow up in that way. I didn't grow up being told that that was something I could pursue. My parents are immigrants. They struggled a lot. They hoped for something different for us, and their idea of what that would be is getting us to college and hoping that we would achieve this American dream, right? And my brothers, one of them's a lawyer, one of them is a CFO for a company and all this kind of stuff. So that's the trajectory I thought I needed to be on. And so film, we didn't talk about the arts. We didn't talk about that as a career. We didn't talk about it. We experienced it. We experienced films. My parents loved old Mexican films. I watched a lot of black and white film growing up, from Pedro Infante to Cantinflas, all of these beautiful cinema. But I only understood it as a viewer. So So when I was at Cal, I said, well, I can't really do the art thing. I don't even know if I'm actually any good at it. So I'm gonna pursue the academic route, and I'm gonna somehow, engage in social change and impact my communities. And then I took 2 years off when I graduated from Cal and ended up in San Francisco with the youth leadership program that organized youth of color using the arts, and it changed my life. Because I already understood the power of the arts. I understood how the arts not only could impact people as they viewed it, but I understood how the arts could heal the artists. I understood how, it was a transformative experience for people. So I already understood that. What I didn't understand was that I could make that art, that I could be an artist. And so in this program, we had a philosophy that whatever we asked the youth to do, we would have to do ourselves. So there I was, doing street theater, I was writing poetry, I was performing, I was making video. And in that space, I fell in love with everything that was the arts. I fell in love with filmmaking because I loved all the arts, and film incorporates so many of the arts, from performance to writing, to photography, all of that. And I loved the reach that film could have, right? It reaches tons of people. So I said, wow, this is pretty amazing. And I feel comfortable in this space, like this is me. And so I decided to pursue filmmaking for all of those reasons. It was me needing a tool. What was my tool? And I discovered filmmaking to be my tool. And so then I went on to study filmmaking.
Yeah, and then so what was your inspiration for wanting to tell this story as your first feature?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you had posed this question about what are the tensions, what do you wrestle with as a filmmaker, coming into film and wanting to be an agent for social change, right? That then poses the question, so then what story do you tell, right? What takes precedence? What is priority? And that's something I struggle with all the time. It's like, there's so much, and forgive me, I curse a lot, so forgive me, I must say that already, but there's a lot of shit out in the world, right, that is happening. There's a lot of shit that I experience as a queer woman of color every day. It's multiple, right? So, so of course my head is spinning because I want to tell so much, right? And I can't necessarily. So I struggle with that. And at the same time, I also grew up a sucker for love stories. I did. John Hughes, who did Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles, he's a problematic filmmaker. He's racist in a lot of ways. But those love stories, I would get wrapped into. I was like, oh, yeah. But I tripped out because I was like, damn, these people have all this time to just fall in love, and nothing else is really happening in their lives other than dealing with the social stuff, And so I had to force myself to see myself in their lives. And so at the same time when I was at film school, I was like, well, I want to be, the John Hughes of my community, but not problematic like that, right? But I want to, there's that part of me that wants to tell those love stories, that wants to talk about death, that wants to talk about divorce, wants to talk about birth, wants to talk about, there's all of that too. And so because that's all in me, I started to feel like, the way some artists influenced me when I was coming to my political consciousness, like Sri Moraga and Audre Lorde, that how they were often talking about the personal and how that was talking about the political and how it would impact a lot of people. And I was like, there's no reason why I can't start with the personal, why I can't tell that love story and also talk about all these big things. So once I sort of came to that okay, then Mosquita y Mari just wouldn't leave me alone. Like it was that, it's one of those things that I lived, one of those stories that I lived that haunted me and haunted me and haunted me and haunted me. And that every time I would put paper, pen to paper, this is what I was writing about. I was writing about being young and love and my first love and how complicated that was. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tell this love story, but I'm also going to talk about all of these other things because they're real and they're true. So, and I understood that in doing that, I was also going to be one of the first to do it. And that saddens me. It saddens me that it's still relatively true, still. And it's 2016, 17. But I understood just how freaking important that would be to put on celluloid a love, our love story in a sense. I wanted to do that. So, so for all those reasons, Mosquita y Mari was born. Thank you. I think I've been snapped at in a while.
So, can you all hear me without the?
Yeah.
YouTube related by this.
You are?
So you spoke. I tell everyone I love and care about to go and see this movie because, as you mentioned, there's so few portraits that we have that are really nuanced, show a nuanced picture of the lives of young Latinas, young Chicanas. It's like so, and so much of your film goes beyond that. I'm still looking for that. I'm still looking for something that I can see myself reflected in, that I know my students can see themselves reflected in, that maybe someday my daughter see herself reflected in. That so many of your films are about queer Latinx stories, and yet they don't reduce the characters' lives to simply sexuality. They're so rich and full, multi-layered. That maybe if you could speak specifically to how Mosquita y Mari helps to challenge, complicate these dominant narratives and sort of flat narratives that we have of what it means to be young Latina queer, growing up in an immigrant community.
Yeah, I think that the key word in that is that it's that our lives aren't reduced, right? Because that's what historically has happened, is that our lives are reduced to, very one-dimensional ideas of what our lives are. We're either gang members or saints. It's always, there's never a middle, there's never a gray. And this movie is all about the gray. That's all it is. It's all about the gray. It's all about no one is this one thing. Mosquita starts as kind of nerdy book person, and Mari's this tough person, but on their journey, they're learning so much about who they are and how they're a combination of each other. No one is this fixed thing. And I think that that is what interrupts what is out there, is the fact that that you see the lives of these women, right? I've done screenings with high school students, and the high school students talked to me like it was a documentary. And like they thought this was a documentary, and I tripped out. I'm like, no, this isn't a documentary. I mean, it is kind of, but the documentaries are made in a certain way, and this was made in a different way, and to me that it's a compliment and an honor, because they're saying, wow, this felt to me like people that are out in the world, and that people out in the world, Chicanitas out in the world, youth out in the world, not just Chicanitas, have to take on very complicated things, from class to how to survive day to day to this legacy that Mosquita's parents are putting on her of self-sacrifice, of you do it for the family, you do it, there's an American dream out there that you strive for. It's just, there's a lot of things that we deal with. And I just, I felt like for me, that looking at John Hughes and how easy those love stories were, and that a lot of times it was about the cliques in the school that they were navigating and nothing really else. It was really important for me to show how this beautiful, tender love is so complicated because of these things that are put upon them, right? So, I think in those ways, that's what Mosquita y Mari does. That is different, and that's what I hope it does. That is different.
I think I mentioned it a little bit in the class, but one of the things that I think is so powerful also about your art making is the collaborative and community, like the way it's so rooted in collaboration and community, right? And the methodology, like especially I'm thinking about the work that you all did with women image makers, but also I know that part of Mosquita y Mari also involved a lot of working with communities. So could you tell us a bit about like how you approach filmmaking in ways that are different from like the mainstream dominant modes in film?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's something that I think, when I decided I wanted to engage the arts as a filmmaker, I went to film school at Cal Arts in Los Angeles, and I struggled to find community at Cal Arts. It's a private school that, there weren't a lot of folks that I saw myself in. So I ended up seeking out other folks that identified as myself and wanted to work in film. And so we formed this group. And when we got together, the one thing we talked about was how we were coming into an industry, or trying to come into an industry that is very male-dominated, white male-dominated, very heteronormative, homophobic, classist, blah, 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 blah. Right? So we grew all that. And so, excuse me, so we were like, so we're not all of that, right? And there is a way that people work in this industry that is really oppressive, and that they practice that oppression in the way they work. It can be very hierarchical, top down, very abusive in terms of how sets are run. There's no acknowledgement often that it is a collaborative art form organically. That is not something I'm making up. You cannot make a film without the help of others who have tremendous talents. They all make up your film. So we were like, why, so let's interrupt that. Let's form a collective. Let's jointly move forward and create art together. Let's not claim it as one person's art. Let's claim it as a group. Let's work differently on set. Let's hire women of color, queer people, to work behind the scenes, because that's also something that doesn't happen. And with the belief that the way we worked would reflect in the film. And that was very true for us. And that said, I also don't want to romanticize the collective process, because it also can create a lot of conflict. But that's okay. It's about how you work through conflict, right? And as women image makers, we struggled with that. And that just humanized us completely, because here we are, some we're badasses, right? We're like, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to interrupt it, and And then in reality, there's just a lot of stuff that can play out in a collective process that can dismantle your collective. And it did. It dismantled our collective. But I learned a lot from that, and I'm so grateful for my sisters that we were able to have that experience with each other. So I just wanted to say that. But I went on understanding, okay, it's not just about the product, it's not just about the art that you're putting out there that is about social change, it's about the practice, right? You also have to have a practice, I think, that reflects your values and your principles and your ideals and what you're preaching. So again, this whole idea of like, how do I do that? So Mosquita y Mari became an opportunity for me to process that and try to figure out how to do that. And one of the ways, aside from who I surround myself with as artists, you know, who I bring into the team, how I treat the team, how we are a team, it was also about how do I engage the community that I am representing in this film, more specifically Southeast LA. Because I'm not from Southeast LA, I'm from the Bay Area, and originally Mosquita y Mari was set in the Bay, and I could not shoot it there. So I had to find another home for this movie. So then Southeast LA presented itself, and I thought to myself, I can go into this community as a Latina, make this film, go out in the world, and all of a sudden represent Southeast LA. But I said, that's not right. Yeah, I'm a Latina, right? But I'm not from Southeast LA. This is another community. This is a community that has its own history, its own world, its own, you know, identity. And I needed to engage this community, not only to reflect the realities of this community in this story, but I also need to humble myself and go to them and say, okay, if I come in and set this story here, how does this process help you all? Like, how do I engage what is happening here on the ground rather than me coming in, taking this story, going out and repping your community? Because to me, that is a problematic practice. So I wanted to decolonize that practice. Yeah, it's a very colonial practice. It happens all the freaking time. It happens in academia, it happens with artists. People go, they think they're going to do good, they go into communities they don't belong to, and they don't acknowledge their privilege. They go out, they represent these communities, they never ask the communities if they can do this, they never engage the communities, and that is, to me, not okay. That is a colonial practice, right? So how do we decolonialize that? So it was about recognizing that, recognizing the privilege I had as a filmmaker, because I'm one of the few right now that is making films in our communities. So it's not that our communities don't want to tell stories, they do, but they don't have access to those tools. So recognizing that, then going to the community and saying, I acknowledge all these things, I would love to tell the story here. How do we create an exchange rather than me taking? How do we shift that? So I went to a nonprofit that's been there for a long time. Through my networks, you know, targeted some folks that had really good reputations of organizing the community, and we started having these conversations. And they said, well, you gotta take it to the youth. You gotta take it to the youth. You gotta talk to them about the story, and they gotta give you the okay. And once they give you the okay, then we'll talk about what we're gonna do. And I was like, okay. and they have a very fierce youth group there. Does a lot of organizing in their community, and so I did a presentation. I'd done presentations to big production companies and producers. This was my scariest presentation. I was so scared. It was a room packed with youth that were looking at me like, who are you? You know? And I was like, I'm nobody. But I've been displaced. I don't have a home. I can't make my movie in my home. And I appreciate your community in so many ways. And I'd love to tell the story here. And I also want to tell it with your help. So, you know, I need, do I have your blessing? I had to leave the room. They had to discuss it. They brought me back in and said, hell yeah, we're hella excited. Like, you know, so it was awesome. And then we started the conversations about, you know, so how do we make this an exchange? And so then the youth were like, they're like, we want to be able to tell our own stories, right? We appreciate you coming in here. We appreciate the story, but how do we tell our own stories? And we're like, okay. So then we developed like a program that was open to the entire community to be able to come and get exposed and engage the process of making a film, which is rare. Like, I was so excited about that. I had never seen that. At me growing up, I never had that. If I had had that, it would have been life changing, or I would have planted seeds at a very young age. So, so we developed a program with the youth. I developed a program with the youth, and so when we were making the film, we had like up to 25 young people. We had an application process because the youth were like, "Oh no, there's going to be a lot of people who just want free food." I was like, I was one of them, and they're like, so we need, there's people out there really want to do this, and let's cater to them. And so we did an application process. People apply. They're the ones to select the youth. Each head of the department. So we have heads of the departments. There's director, production designer, producer, cinematographer. When I hired them, I said, if you want to work on this film, you have to work with the youth. We're doing an exchange with the youth. If you're not down with that, then you're out the door. Of course, everybody was down with it. And so that's how we started to work. We started to do that, casting in the community, doing all this kind of really awesome stuff. So it became a very collaborative thing. And so I feel like what's represented in the film, the heart, the essence, the soul that some people feel is coming from the youth. It's that exchange that happened. And so Mosquita y Mari transformed. Like, I had an idea of what it was going to be, but when the youth got involved, it really transformed the vision. And I'm so grateful I didn't get to shoot in San Francisco, because I grew as a filmmaker, as an artist, and the film grew as a spirit. So I was like, this is who I am as a filmmaker. This is okay. I'm starting to figure out who I am. And so I'm trying to incorporate this model that is ever changing, because every community is different and has different needs. But I'm trying to change the way, I'm trying to impact this process, decolonialize it. But it is very hard to do in an industry that is like, what the hell? I don't get it.
Can you talk to, because anytime you disrupt anything that, any sort of colonial practice, there's going to be pushback. And
Yes.
So can you talk, I don't know how we're doing with time, but if you want to speak to some of those tensions and how you navigated, and that you navigated all of that.
Yeah, I think for me with Mosquita y Mari, because we made it so outside of the system that we didn't have any pushback. That, the producer that I had on board, he's a native brother. He gets it. He's like, Aurora's going to do Aurora. Like, he's just like, I'll try to help raise the funds. So I didn't have any pushback. What is complicated is now, because I made this film and I got some notice, there are different people knocking on the door that work differently. And so they come very quickly. They're like, okay, we could give you this and we could give you that. And then I'm like, wait a second. Well, I want to back up. Like, I want to have some conversations with people about this and what this means to them, and what this, what the impact could be from A to Z. And, I have to educate a lot of people. So it's hard, but I'm trying to talk more about this process so I can impact a lot more filmmakers that are outside of the system or even in the system. And I think that is that's as much as I can do right now, and just try to model what my thoughts are and my ideals are. Yeah.
I think we wanted to give an opportunity for any questions from you all about the film, or
Yeah.
I love your film. I love queer community stories because they tend to explore cliches.
Thank you.
I'm curious about how you worked with the actors and broaching the fact that you're making a queer film, and how the community responded, and how you facilitated what appears like a really intense love and lust between these two actors.
Well, it's interesting. When I took the film to the community and I talked to the youth, I spoke more about the queer element of the story, the two young women, and everybody was very open to it. When I went out into the high schools to cast, because I saw about 300 girls, I was also pretty upfront with it and felt that it was important to do that with some of the youth. But when I cast Mosquita y Mari, the conversations with them were different. When I met them, they came to me differently with a manager. They were already acting, so they came to me wanting to land these roles. So I never had to, present it a certain way to them. So what was really interesting in the way I approached it with them, or my style, was not to say this is a queer love story. I didn't say that to them because I didn't think it was fair to put a label on it when in the movie these girls aren't even labeling themselves. This is a process. I know that there are young people that are labeling themselves now and self-identifying, and that's great. And then there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily in that space yet. And so I didn't know, I never asked either one of them how they identified at all. For me, it was about, look, I am exploring these two young women who are growing up together, and they're living their lives together, and they're loving each other in that process, right? They're connecting with each other in that experience. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for two young women who are connecting, right? On all levels, they're connecting. And so that's where the conversations were. And I was like, do you understand that? And they were like, oh, hell yeah. I get that. Like that, I do that. That's what happens all the time for me. So never did I, because I felt like if I pushed them on these conversations, then there are a lot of different issues that can come up, right? And I wasn't like, you have to identify a certain way to be in this film, because I did not think that was fair. Because I'm queer now, but I didn't necessarily identify as queer when I was in high school, but I was having a whole lot of queerness happening, So the conversations were about things that I feel like anybody could identify. It's wanting that, connecting with someone in a real way. Like, she sees you, you see her. No one else sees you like she does. Yeah, I get that. So the conversations and working with them was like that. I was really, really, really blessed to have them connect on their own. They liked each other on their own. They vibed off each other on their own. So really, I was photographing what was happening to them as two people who didn't know each other. All of a sudden, they were coming together, working together, and they were vibing off each other. I'm not saying they were falling in love per se, but there was something really special in the way that they were getting to know each other that really helped, because it would have been a lot more complicated if they disliked each other. That would have been really hard. So they did like each other. So the conversation, young people, directing young people, they're the smartest people on this planet. I had an easier time directing the youth on the film than the adults. It's very true. With young people, it was always about the truth. It was always about, look, what I'm asking for is the truth here. If you give me anything but the truth, I'm going to call you out on it. It's bullshit, okay? That's what I'm going to tell you. It's bullshit. So they knew that. They know when they're bullshitting. Adults don't always know when they're bullshitting. They don't even know. So we would, so I was just like, they just got it in that way, So that's how I worked with them. And with all the super intimate stuff, they were very comfortable with each other, and I always made sure there was a safe space for them. So I cleared out the sets. The cinematographer was a female. myself. The sound person, the boom person was a guy, but I had him hide behind the couch. Like, it was like, I just tried to have, create this world as real as possible. So these two young women are alone in this house. I was trying to have them be as alone as possible in that space. But, they did have a camera on them, which is always intrusive. But I would give them exercises with the cameras. I would have them go home and have someone film them a lot. Like you have to get used to that intrusiveness. So trying to get them comfortable in front of the camera. So those were the approaches that I had. But I wasn't really worried about the youth. I was worried about the adults.
Any other questions? Don't be shy. So we're in a room filled with young people, and so I guess if you have that are maybe struggling or thinking about how your stories, your love stories, fit in within the larger narrative. So I don't know what advice you would give to young youth of color, women of color, Latinx, young Chicanas, young Latinas, young women of color about who are trying to make sense of how to tell that story from the margin.
Yeah, I think that there are several things to consider. One thing for me is having been, creating on the margins is an exciting place to create from because you're challenging a lot. There's a lot of innovation in that space, and I think it breeds it, right? There's that space for it, and I think that's wonderful. I also think that there is the harshness of it, of having to be on the margins, of not having access to resources, being denied certain things. That can be difficult, and it is difficult. So I think that it's important to surround yourselves with a community of artists that can help you through those times where maybe you are not believing that this can happen. Because I was really blessed enough to be surrounded by people that always believed that this was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. So I think that is important. I also think that what's important is if you have a vision for yourself, to not limit yourself in that vision. What I'm trying to say is, I think when I was in college, I had a vision for myself, or post-college, I had a vision for myself, and I'm going to become an independent filmmaker. I'm going to tell these stories. I want to go to Cannes. I want to go to Sundance. I'm going to be that auteur. Like, that's what I want. And it's a beautiful dream. That's a big dream. But I realized that dreams can be so much bigger because in reality now, ironically, it's a very narrow dream for myself. It's a very narrow vision because the world is shifting, shape-shifting quickly. There's so much that is changing that if I would have allowed myself to see beyond those borders, I could have access to way more platforms as an artist than I do now. For example, I went to film school and I studied film, but I could have also studied television, and I didn't, because at that time, television was, very, very, just hard to get out, just hard to get into. It's very male and white and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, that's not for me. Now, television is what is sustaining the careers of independent filmmakers. It is a place that is now welcoming independent filmmakers. They want us as creators, as visionaries, but they want people that understand how television works. So rather than, being prepared to take that dive, I have to teach myself now, what does that mean? How do I write television, this and that, so I can engage it? So So 20 years ago, there was no internet and no cell phones. In my lifetime, imagine what's going to exist 20 years from now. That's what I'm trying to say. Just, just let it sort of be a little open and floaty so you can incorporate what is changing around you, and then you can really, navigate that vision you have for yourself in a way that will sustain you, because you have to sustain yourself. As an artist on the margins, you have to sustain yourself. How do you sustain yourself? You have to be savvy. Savvy as a lot. Savvy. So being savvy. And to me, savvy is that. Don't get so fixed. Like, expand that vision for yourself. Be open. And those are my words of wisdom. Any other questions? We still have some time. Over here and over there.
You talked about how, I guess, like growing up and being from your family, like maybe going a different path, which you and your parents talked about and discussed. Like, yeah. How did that conversation come about? And you wanted to be your MFA?
Yeah. That is a really good question. For those of you who didn't hear, the question is, how did that conversation happen with my parents when I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker? Because I wasn't raised to think that way. It was a conversation that went well, but I think it went well because about 6 months prior, I had come out to them as queer. So I sort of started breaking them in already that things weren't going to go this way. I was sort of inventing myself. So when I sat them down, because I had to come out again. I say this, I came out twice. I said, I know you want me to go on and pursue, graduate studies and all that, but I want to be a filmmaker. And they were quiet. They just kind of looked at each other, and my dad said, "Well, I understand that to be a very complicated thing, filmmaking. Like, how do you do that?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out. But what I do know is that this is a part of who I am. So I need your support, because there's not a lot of people out there like me who are going to try to do this. So it's important for me to have your support." So it kind of went like that. There are a lot of quiet moments, but they, by that point, understood that when I came to them with something big like this, that I was serious, right? I was serious. So they understood it, and they said, "Okay, well, whatever we have to do, we'll do it." So that went well, and so then what I ended up doing myself was trying to help them, expose them to the independent cinema, because I wanted them to understand what my world was kind of going to be. So, and that would help, so when I told them I'm in a film festival, I'm in a, which is a big deal for independent film, I'm in a film festival, they're like, "Wow, that's awesome." They understood that, rather than, "I have no idea what that means," So it was a lot of, as I educated myself, I was educating them about what this would be like. So when I went to Sundance, that was major for my parents. My parents were like, she just, became that lawyer or doctor kind of thing. They were so proud. It was a big deal. It was a really, really big deal. So, yeah. So it was cool. Now my dad, he'll tell his friends, my son, yeah, no, but my daughter, she's a director. And they're like, "What does she direct?" "Movies." And it's really cute. It's really cute. My father's adorable. Yeah, there was a question back there. Oh, okay. Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
So you're talking about the change you think that you've seen in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
How now in the constant technology available, the ways in which artists are able to break into different industries.
Yeah.
And so a concern that I have about that, personally speaking, is like, do you think that people who are intending to become artists artists when they make art should try to study in other fields, like purposely and deliberately, and try to have other professions and have making art still be something they do, or should they kind of focus like another way and actually study like art?
I think that I think it's important. I think for me, what is important, anything you pursue is hard. It's all hard. I look at my brother who's a lawyer, and he hates it. I mean, it's just so hard. My other brother, you know, his trajectory's been hard. It's all hard. I think what is key is coming to terms with what is my passion? What fills me? What excites me? Whatever that is, I think that is what you have to honor, because I think that will, even if you decide to go another route, it will always haunt you. And like my little brother talks about how he's like, if I could do it again, I would be a pastry chef. And he said that for years. I'm like, dude, I think you need to go make some muffins. You really want to do this. But ultimately, I think because the road is hard, I always think you should center that passion, and in whatever form that is, honor it and center it. And I think that, you know, and how you apply that as the world shifts, you know, again, as long as you center and honor it, you'll figure out its home and how to evolve it within you, is what I think. Yeah. So.
And even if that conversation looks like the one that Mari and Mosquita had with their parents, yeah, you still honor that. That's a scene that like hits me, one of the scenes.
The one where
like you don't have to worry about that. You have to focus on school, this and that.
Yes. Yeah. That's very true. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you think there's any chance your film can make it on TV?
It has been on TV actually.
Oh.
Yeah. It was on HBO for a while. It was on another channel, which I don't remember right now. It's actually also been around the world. It's been broadcast in New Zealand, France, a lot of different places. It was streaming on Netflix. So it has definitely had its lives out there. It's just not like prime time or anything, but HBO is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have any current projects that you're working on that you might want to
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have quite a few actually. With regards to what is happening in television and digital media, I am co-creating a series with two Black women who are from the independent world. They did a film called Mississippi Jam, and one of them just was a producer and head writer on Queen Sugar with Ava DuVernay. So I'm partnering with them, and we are writing something together that we would produce, write, and direct, that we would be approaching networks with to see if we can get it done. But that one is still very much in the works, but it is about these two women, Black and Latina, who end up going on the run after a protest kind of goes sour. So that one's looking at a lot of issues. Yeah. And Tina and I are both queer, so you know we got some queer stuff in there. But I'm excited about that one. It's called Lamb. And I'm writing another one called Loveland, which would be something that I'm writing and producing that would take me back home. I'd go to Oakland and it is an epic love story. Yeah, it's epic. Epic. And that will track the love between these two young women throughout different decades in their lives, from high school, 20s, 30s, 40s, and on. For those of you who wanted more in Mosquita y Mari, I'm about to give you a shitload. I'm excited about that one. And these two young women are they're very different from Mosquita y Mari. So excited about that. And I have a film that I'm going to be making in the spring. Well, I'm going into the genre of zombies. It's an idea a friend of mine had that he just wrote me into, and I'm actually excited about it because the lead, the woman, is a young Chicana who's about to have her quinceañera. And quinceañera zombies. There's a lot of social commentary. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Toxic tequila, okay? So it's not a comedy actually, but that one is actually really coming up soon, which I'm excited about because I also want to be able to venture into genre filmmaking and just expand how the ways I tell stories and how stories that I want to tell can live in these other genres. So I'm excited about that. And then there's a feature film that I'm writing, directing, called Los Valientes, which is about a queer undocumented immigrant who ends up in rural America. And that one is the one that is ready to go. I'm really excited about it, and I'm having a hard time finding the funding. A lot. A lot. Sweet. It all helps, let me tell you. But yeah, Los Valientes is, for me, it makes sense as my second feature. And it's very, to me, it's just so timely right now with what's happening in terms of migration patterns and migrants ending up in very non-traditional spaces. What that happens, when there's a clash of poor working class folk, especially when there's national rhetoric around, the nativist rhetoric. So again, it's a love story set in this context that I'm really excited about, and my budget's bigger, and so I'm navigating different waters, which is challenging, because the bigger your budget, the riskier your project is seen. People get scared about producing work like that, and they said that about Mosquita y Mari again and again and again and again and again, that no one would want to see it. It would go nowhere. That's what I was told. So I keep going back to people and like, I've heard this before, and I have proved you wrong. And here I am again, having to have these conversations. So it is challenging, but but I just continue to, while it's trying to find its home, I'm writing and creating collaborations I'm really excited about. So yeah, put some good energy out there for those things to happen. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Aurora.
Oh, thank you.